Okay, everyone, welcome. I think I've got the technical stuff worked out. We're trying to record this, and I just never know. Were some of you not here for the first session? Okay, so this is good. We're gonna do a quick review before we get in. We have 7 sins, and we got to 2 of them last time, so we have 5 we want to finish up with. So, quick review. Different ways of thinking about sin. But what I want you to see is it's not just when I do a bad thing, when I say a bad word. That's just the visible plant. And we're going to talk about how sin is much deeper. And in fact, it's something that we can't escape. We can't decide, I'm not going to sin today. Because we're forever curved inward. The relationship with our God is unhealthy, broken in some ways. So this first thing of doing bad things, that's a traditional way of thinking of sin, but I want us to think about it deeper. When we confess, we used a different confession today, but we talk about the pervasiveness. It's thought, word, and deed. But what we've done, and also but what we left undone. I mean, we just can't escape this power of sin in which we live. And then we'll come back to this, but we bring in into our confession love, because love undoes, proper love, godly love undoes sin, and sin twists love. That's what we'll get to in just a minute here. So we want to think about the roots of sin. We might see sin in our lives, the activities that we would say are sinful, but they begin with attitudes and powers that are beneath the surface that we are in bondage to. When that time comes in the confession where there's silence, it is meant for you to think about this confession that you're just about to make. So there's this brief silence to think about your sins. And you might not be thinking about that at all. You might be thinking, I've done pretty good this week. Okay. What I would want you to think about are these 7 or what others, the things, the powers in our life that are pushing us to and fro, and then causing us to do things. So I'm not going to talk about the history of how we got to these. So we talked about pride. It is, of the 7, the big one. It is the one that historically we've said this is the one that just breaks the first commandment right from the start. Because what it does is says, I don't need God. I've got this under control. I'm in charge. You know, there is a healthy self-image and pride that we might want to acknowledge, but there is a sinful pride that simply puts God to the periphery of our life and puts us in charge. And we could really explore that much more deeply. Then also anger or wrath, we talked about last time. Here again, there is a healthy, righteous anger that God exhibits and that we might be able to exhibit. It's the anger that seeks justice for our neighbor and cares about. When someone who you love is harmed, you feel anger because of what they have gone through. But the sinful anger comes out of our pride and our selfishness and not wanting our lives to be inconvenienced, because again, we're at the center of things. So we looked at, so we talked about that. Then, and this is what I think is really helpful in this discussion, that really these 7 sins, at least most of them, are a form of love that got twisted up. And we'll talk a lot about that today. It's not that love has gone out the window. It's that you love, but the love is not for God and for our neighbor. In terms of pride, it's for ourselves first. And God and the neighbor take second or no place at all. Anger, this is a little harder one to connect to love, except that it's maybe a lack of ability to love our neighbor that our anger arises, and we just get frustrated with them, disappointed with them, and love for ourselves. So that one's a little harder, but the other 5 we're going to talk about certainly fit into this. That greed is an inordinate love for things. You could think of it that way. That lust is an inordinate love for physical sex or other things, lust for power, lust for fame. So the love gets put where it's not intended to be. So we'll talk about that. I think that's a helpful way to think about this. So let's do the last 5. Gluttony.
You know, what you have just said now, like that could be a week of therapy session.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when did that last happen to you? And you go, oh no, of course, and clearing it up and saying, I'm sorry and all stuff like that. Oh yeah. Just noticing it in your own life.
Okay. That's wonderful.
Well,
That's the benefit of just having this topic as a discussion. And I suggested it, it's kind of a downer of a topic, but it is so helpful to understand who we are and what we do, that it helps explain, I think, what sin does to us and twisting things up. Let's think about gluttony. Excess love. Could be a lot of different definitions. I'll share some different things. Excess love for an object that destroys the capacity to truly love someone or something more deserving. Kind of like this. That the love gets put in the wrong place. So let me say more about that. We think of gluttony in terms of food, so we'll start there, but it can be other things. So we could think of it as an overconsumption of food or drink or other things. Overindulgence to the point of being wasteful. It's a consuming of things for an insatiable desire for gratification. What can happen with gluttony is, if we think of it in terms of love, is the love of, let's say, food in this instance. The love of food becomes so important that you forget that food has a different purpose in your life. What is that purpose? First of all, sustain our bodies, right? Second, food is something that we use to nurture our relationships. It's our social thing, yeah. You sit down with someone and you share food together. And I saw one person title this topic, "Food Without Friends." In other words, the food becomes the most important thing and the friends are not important. So the focus gets put on the desire for consumption, the desire for gratification of what that food brings to us.
Do dogs count as friends?
Yes.
We don't share at the table.
Yeah. There's that commercial series of, the person who says, well, that's dog food you have in your refrigerator. They get kicked out.
Yeah.
Fighting words. So if eating was intended to unite us, now eating can divide us. So it wreaks havoc in our relationships because we want the food more than we want the company. Not that there isn't an abundance. When Jesus fed the 5,000, the 2 John 6:1-15, everyone got as much as they wanted and there were leftovers. There were 12 baskets of leftovers. God is an abundant God. So it's not that gluttony is about just wasting and having too much. It's that desire. It's that desire to just want more and more, and how it affects the rest of your life. You've maybe heard of Sodom and Gomorrah, and whenever they try to portray the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, they try to they usually they show sexual sins or something like that. But in Ezekiel, it describes the sin of Sodom in this way. This was the guilt of Sodom. They had pride, excess of food, prosperous ease, but they did not help the poor and needy. Okay. It's all for us. If we move beyond just food, we think of gluttony. It may be that we demand of something more than it was intended to give. So the gluttony for power, let's say, and that becomes divisive in our lives with our relationships, which were intended to be the most important. People are more important than things. A spiritual gluttony, I ran across this. It's the desire for spiritual practices that will give satisfaction whenever you want them to. So that, there are many times I go to worship, that's not leading worship, well, maybe leading worship too, but I'll go to a worship service and I'll come out and I'll go, yeah, didn't do much for me today. And there's the sin of gluttony would say, no, it's got to do something. It's got to feed me. So I read this article. This is from the evangelical tradition of where baptism is done at an older age, and the person who's a college professor said, "I'm noticing at this evangelical college, I'm noticing baptism just isn't important among our students, and if it is, it's they want something out of it. They want to feel something." And so they might get baptized, and then 5 years later, they'll say, I better do that again because I'm not feeling it. The gluttony of wanting something, wanting to feel, wanting satisfaction might be another kind of way to think about that. Gluttony wants more and more and more out of something that can't give that much. Oh, I think it's always interesting how we are referred to, especially by our politicians. We are taxpayers. We're referred to as taxpayers. The other reference they'll make of us is we are consumers. Now, when you think about that, that's a pretty destructive way to refer to ourselves. We just consume things, and I think this falls under the category of gluttony. You know, as Christians, we would want a more healthy label, like a steward of this world, a steward of this world, not just a consumer. And I think of ourselves just as consumers puts us in a bad place, because the world is just ours to take. Scripturally, the rich man and Lazarus, you might remember that story. Lazarus had nothing. He was poor. He sat at the gate and begged. The rich man had everything. And he knew Lazarus was there. He knew Lazarus by name as the story proceeds, but it wasn't his responsibility to care for Lazarus. So,
And their prayers in church.
what's that?
Isn't that also the prayers in church? The rich man says, thank you, God, that.
Oh yeah, that
I'm
other
not
story.
like-
I'm not like
yeah.
the tax collector. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. That's a good story on pride. Talk about that. I'm taking too much time here. So what would be the opposite of gluttony? Yes, I thought temperance. All things in moderation. I think about some of the Christian virtues that talk about that. Right. Lust. Again, it's a form of love, but it's love that's lost its way. An excess love of self and one's pleasure that turns us away from people to focus on gratification. So, in a healthy relationship, physical attention and sexual expression are part of that. But lust takes the physical part and makes it prime, while the person in the relationship gets demoted. So we think of, like pornography, where the person gets objectified. Doesn't matter who it is, just matters how they look. And you don't care about that person. You just care what they can do for you, how they can help you in your sexual exploits. So same would be true, obviously, of the word, where you go out and have sex with someone on the street. Those are the excessive ones, but of course lust can direct our lives too. So again, you can have lust for other things, but we think of this in terms of sexuality. It's the restrained, unethical expression of our sexual impulse, or we fail to see the boundaries of what sex was intended to have. Immoral, it exaggerates the importance of sex and believes love in the absence of sex is impossible, or that sex will satisfy in the absence of love. So it really plays off of love, but takes it in a different direction. I don't know if you've seen or read much about trafficking in our world, but goodness gracious, it's a great tragedy. People who get kidnapped and forced into, why can't I think of this word? Prostitution.
Okay.
They get forced into prostitution and they can't escape.
It's really interesting that a lot of the bathrooms now, at least the girls' bathrooms, all say, if you're here and don't want to be with who you are,
Yeah,
here's the phone number, call
Nice.
and we'll be right down.
oh,
And
good.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
comforting to know that that's available. But, you know,
yeah.
men can't go in the ladies' bathroom, so.
I forget, Pastor Al someone, he, this was 25 years ago now. He, dedicated his life to helping slow down the trafficking of
There was a movie on that,
young women.
on him.
Pastor Al,
Mhm.
yeah. He came and he put together a curriculum, he came and presented it to us, at the church I was serving. And we used it a few years in our confirmation program, because Minnesota was a state where, you know, wide-eyed, young women taught to be nice to everyone, were getting, caught into the trafficking and, taken away from this state to Chicago or Las Vegas and forced into prostitution. So, you know, we just had teach our young people to be careful, wise, about these things. Just because someone's showering you with gifts doesn't mean they have good intentions at heart. Yeah, I think if we think of how lust depersonalizes other people, and the relationship is not important, it's just the gratification that comes up. So David and Bathsheba, you might know that story. The king sees Bathsheba and he wants her, and so he, because he's king, makes her come over to his place, and some would say raped her or had sex with her, however you want to interpret that story. And then has to clean up his mess. So he has to have her husband killed to try and cover it up. And so one sin begets other sins. Of course, Matthew, Jesus is teaching on the Sermon on the Mount and says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. I tell you, if you just lust with someone in your heart, you have already committed adultery. That gets at that root of what sin does. It destroys the proper relationship God intended for us to have with one another. What would be a remedy? Chastity is a helpful word, except if you think it means abstinence from sex. That's not the opposite of lust, because sex has its proper place. So if chastity means a moral life where sex is within the committed relationships, yes. If it means abstinence from sex, then we say, no, it's not exactly what we're going for the opposite of what lust is. Also just proper love. I mean, godly love for our neighbor and care for them so that we don't end up using them for our own purposes. Sloth. Not something we think about too much, I don't think. No, I don't. But
Don't ever do it.
if we think,
Yeah.
let's see what I have for definition here. An apathy for anything in life. So if we think in terms of love that got twisted up, sloth is the inability to really love anything. You know, God has given us a good creation to live in and given us to one another. But this sin of sloth just says, nothing, I find nothing of interest. Nothing's important to me. So it it fails to direct your life in any meaningful way. Because nothing's worth living for. Nothing's worth dying for. Sloth. Something different. It can have us go through the motions, but never really feel or do what the motions were intended to do. So in terms of worship, we can go to church, but not worship our God. We just kind of show up, go through the motions. We can say the liturgy without any praise or gratitude in our hearts. We can put something in the plate, but it doesn't mean anything to us because we don't really care. We just
So
want to
does
do what
depression-
everyone else.
Does depression go into this then?
Probably would think in terms of mental health terms, you might think of it as something that contributes to this too. Yeah. Inability to love because nothing matters. I had a clip, I don't have time to play it, but I was listening to a radio program. It was about addiction. And this person called in and said, she's something to this effect. I got to be about 28 years old and I realized I have done nothing with my life. The addiction just kind of kept me from ever really caring about anything. And she finally just something just woke her up. And I just thought it was a great maybe description of what sloth can do. You just waste your life away. Now, this is going to sound very judgmental because it's something that I have no interest in. But when I hear that usually, mostly men, spend 5-6 hours a day playing video games, I go, really? And truth be told, I have a son who lives at our house that plays video games. And I just think, there's so much in life to do. There's so many things to care about, to dedicate your life to. And, just to say, this is it. This is all I want to do in my life. It's get a paycheck and then play video games. I just think, I just think that kind of bumps up against sloth a little bit. Because they just haven't found what really can bring life. You know, we talk about service, love for our neighbor, caring about what's happening in our world. That Philippians passage. Philippians 3. After all. So this is St. Paul talking to the Philippians. Not that I've already obtained this or have reached the goal, but I press on to make it my own because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Beloved, I do not consider that I've made it my own, but this one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on to the goal of the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. But those of us who are mature, be of the same mind. And if you think differently about anything, this too God will reveal to you. This wording of he's running a race. He's pressing on. He's got a life that God gave him, and he's going to use it to the glory of God. And I just think that that's the opposite then of what sloth would have us do. Diligence, courage, to find joy in things, to enjoy this creation and this life that God has given you, to invest ourselves in good and godly things. I just think that's important. Yeah.
I'm just gonna be, I bet your son finds joy in his computer game.
He does.
I just said,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, for him, it's, you can play with other people, or
That,
it's his social life, really.
yeah, I have a grandson that he's epileptic. And maybe some ADHD and stuff. He has a job and everything, but yeah, his social life is on that computer
It's on the computer.
with kids all over. He met
Yeah.
a few in college and they're just kind of all over. And that is pretty much his social life.
Yeah.
But I can't see it, but.
Daniel in our bedroom are next to each other,
Mhm.
and we'll try to fall asleep, and he is
He's up all night.
laughing,
Yeah.
laughing with these people that he's playing the game with, and I just think I'm
Yeah.
so glad to hear him laugh. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
brings me joy to know that he's finding
Yeah.
joy in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, our grandson is kind of the same way,
Yeah.
but
So it's judgmental when you say that, because I
it's
don't
better.
find joy in that, but
No, yeah. Yeah, I think
just-
too, he could.
I just want to
get
make the
out
world a
and
better
do
place,
things,
and I don't
but
see how that happens.
Yeah, for him, I guess it works.
Yeah. Got a couple more. Envy, a sadness or desire for possessions, happiness, or abilities that someone else has. Okay? Yeah. Sorrow at the prosperity of others, and joy when they get hurt.
Oh.
Mm.
It's the German word for that. So a couple quotes. This is from Bette Midler. The worst part of success is trying to find someone who is happy for you. A guy named Josh Billings said, love looks through a telescope, envy looks through a microscope. Intense focus on what someone else has, and then behind that is your own inability, your own sense of not having what you really want to have, your inabilities, your deficiencies. What's unique about envy is it's a painful sin. The other 6 sins, while leading to destruction, at least have a kick to them. You benefit from them. So for instance, pride, you can feel powerful. Greed, you can get pretty well off. Envy has no short-term reward. It's the constant reminder that you are lacking. that someone else seems more talented, more able, more willing, more rewarded than you are. And so you wallow in this shortcoming. Envy poisons our lives with ill feelings toward yourself and towards others. This might be where the expression green with envy comes, because green is the color of illness, sickness. In Genesis 4, Cain and Abel, Abel's offering was acceptable to God and Cain's wasn't, and Cain got pretty angry about that and killed his brother. Envy can maybe be read into that. In Matthew 20, Matthew 20 is the parable that Jesus tells about the workers in the vineyard, and some were hired at 5 a.m. and some were hired at 9, and some were hired at noon, and some were hired at 3, and some were hired at 5 p.m. And then
Same money.
and they all got paid the same. Some worked 1 hour, some worked 12 hours. And of course, the ones who worked the largest got envious because they thought they should be paid more. And the owner said, "This is what I agreed to pay you. I just choose to be generous." That generosity and plays with their sense of fairness, which I think it does for all of us, but that's the way God is.
That's the way we think. Sorry. People today.
So I think envy's remedy is getting your focus on someone else and finding that their benefit is actually an occasion for joy, not just for your feeling inadequate. So finding a way to rejoice in others. I think praying for our enemies and praying for others is a good way to awaken in us a new way of correcting love. That you pray for them, remember them in positive ways. Kindness, of course. I think that was the last one. Greed, desire and love for possessions, inordinate love of money and possessions, along with the dedication to their pursuit. The love of an object that destroys the capacity to love what is more deserving, that being people. Scripture refers to greed as idolatry because you put in the God's place something else. You put money in God's place or possessions and think, if I have these, then my life will be full, rich, blessed. So we, instead of looking to God for life, we look to something else. Breaks the first commandment. It leads to an over pursuit of wealth and material things. There's the inability to be satisfied at times with greed. So let's say you receive what you want, but instead of saying, "Oh, no, I'm fine," it only stimulates you to want more. And so you get on a treadmill. It distorts our values and puts love of things above love of people, and certainly love of God. Is it 1 Timothy, the love of money is the source of all evil, or something like that. And Luke 12. Oh, that's the farmer who wanted to build bigger barns.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when I preach on that, I don't say he shouldn't have built bigger barns. That could have been the case. Maybe that was what was most needed in that situation. But the problem is it's all about him.
Hmm.
Listen to how he talks to himself. Jesus told a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. And God said to him, you fool, this night your life is required of you. There's no one else in his life. What about his servants that helped him bring in the harvest? What about his family? He only is talking to himself and thinking about how everything belongs to him. And so love gets twisted and it doesn't care about others. It just cares about what you have, what you want, what you need, things. So what if he had said, I'm going to build bigger barns and then I'll be able to keep this grain and share it with others rather than have it go to waste. What if he had thought about what God would want him to do with it? What if he thought about how he could benefit others in his community? So greed distorts our viewpoints. Simplicity, contentment, I just think is a great Christian virtue, to be content with our place and what we have. And of course, so here's a little game that I play with myself. I have my folder where I file, my automatic giving, my receipts for where I donated to this charity or that charity, and my quarterly donation sheets. I name that file medicine, because I think giving away is medicine for the soul, to fight against greed. So I have to take my medicine by opening my hands and sharing. So when I see that file, I thought, gee, if I had put this in my IRA, I'd be doing really well. And then I realized, no, I need to do this. Okay. So once again, we are talking about some deep, powerful things in our life that show forth in the decisions we make, the thoughts we have, and the way we direct our lives. And I think when we say we have not loved our neighbors as ourselves, we have not loved you with our whole heart, soul, and mind, we're asking God to bring us back to that love, so that we don't love things or our satisfactions and all those, our appetites, more than we love God and one another. Sin is a twisting of love. Christ brings, in following in the way of the cross, Christ brings us to die to ourselves and to find out what it is again to love in a healthy way. So we call forth to God to help us to return to that love. get twisted up in our lives again.
Mhm.
That's what I got.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
It's like